The most important and the looming and constant thing was the relationship between my parents, which was definitely not cordial. There was big element of domestic violence, so that was always the issue in the house. Really, I kind of became the person who would try to avoid conflicts, because we had seen so many of them right from the childhood. So any way of actually making sure that nobody's getting entangled with each other. Before I got married, I was living with my mother, which I chose to do, very happily when my parents got separated. During that time, I also remember when I was going through this depression, anxiety phase. I remember this feeling of trying to live up to something, like constantly trying to live up to something. I mean, of course, everybody in society does that, but then if you have to do it every day at home, and being on guard that something that you say may just become dirty, will be taken in a wrong way, which is disturbing. There is an element of bad relationship in the family, and then the person who you are living with, which is your mother, where you're born, that is the be all and end all of the truth of life, as we have been brought up. But when you feel that this is not working, and you feel that why not, and then till that time you've not woken up to the fact that okay, there could be things that need addressing. This relationship also needed relationship management. Until that time, I would kind of develop this belief that can I be in a healthy relationship. I was very determined that I'm going to take care of myself, and I made sure that I found a therapist who would be beyond the norms.
There are many, many of you who have written to us on Zen-Brain asking us to discuss the topic of difficult relationships between parents and adult children. Now, this is not an easy topic to discuss. It's a very broad and general term, and really, who decides what is difficult and what is not, really, right? But the reality is that there are overbearing, over-involved parents who refuse to respect their children's boundaries even as adults. They continue to interfere in their children's lives, continue to emotionally blackmail them. Parents who expect their children to be obligated throughout their lives and take care of all their needs. And then, of course, there are kids who expect their parents to keep taking care of them throughout their lives without doing anything on their own, without achieving a single thing. Greedy kids who only want. There are kids like that. They want their parents to fulfill all their needs. Yes, there are kids like that who don't respect their parents' boundaries. And then, of course, there are also kids who abandon their parents when they need them the most. We also know such kinds, don't we? As you can see, there are all kinds. It is difficult to discuss, but we also understand that there are always two sides to a coin. And today we are seeking to address a few issues, especially related to creating healthy boundaries on both sides, and therefore how we can create healthier parent-adult-children relationships. And who better to help us navigate and answer these pertinent questions than clinical psychologist Dr. Vandita Dubey. So, Doc, thank you very much for joining us. Now, most parent-adult-children relationships are tough in their own way. Everyone has some issue or the other that they are dealing with, and this discussion is not about them. So, Doc, help us understand this. When is it a real problem?
See, I think most parent-child relationships have a history to them, right? It's not that something crops up when you're a grown-up suddenly. Most of the time, it's something that's existed for a long, long time, as long as the relationship has existed. And it's just that things build and things take different shapes as you go along through your lifespan. I mean, so development, there'll be different challenges when you're in your 20s with your parents. You'll go through probably different challenges in your 30s, 40s, 50s. It's a challenge really when, I guess for either, but also for grown up children, where they feel that in some ways they don't have the freedom to do what they want to do, make the choices they want to live the kind of life or lifestyle that they want to live. And And then there are expectations and there are issues of communication. It's about how stressed somebody feels with whatever is going on. So taking for granted that relationships to a degree are always challenging and you always have to work on them. Communication is not always absolutely crystal clear with anybody for that matter. When a relationship comes with a degree of stress, then it's an issue.
Can you give us examples of when is it problematic?
So, okay, I've again been working with people all through the age group. So, a lot of times I hear from people in their 20s, it's around issues around being independent, career choices or life partner choices or lifestyle choices, and where they feel constrained by their parents or the parents have a point of view. Or, I mean, I've even spoken with people who are in the 20s who are worrying about their parents who are probably in their 60s and about having to take care of it. I'll have to move to X town and I have to therefore make my career decisions such or my lifestyle choices such so that I can do, because I'll have to take care of them. So that kind of a thing. Whereas, at that point in time, most people don't need taking care of in their 60s. They're not at a stage where, they're incapable of daily living or anything like that for most folks. But it's that thing sitting on your head saying, this is what I have to do, this is what I have to do, and I have to make my decisions kind of based on that. Then sometimes it's also issues with what impact your relationship with your parents has on your romantic relationship or your marriage for that matter, or decision to have kids, and then later on in the 30s would be even parenting decisions and so on. So it like I said, it gets played out in different ways, but wherever it's causing stress, whether it's causing stress because it's causing stress in your marriage, or it's causing stress to you because you're feeling constrained about where to live, what to do, how to conduct your life, that becomes a problem.
One of the major problems are overbearing parents and also over interfering parents decide that it's okay to interfere in their kids' relationships, in their lives on almost a daily basis, right? Take us through some of the parenting styles, because I think that sort of decides what kind of relationship you have in future, right?
Right. Everybody's parenting style sits somewhere on a spectrum. And if we take the two ends of the spectrum, being, one end is often termed as authoritarian, which is your very controlling, very discipline oriented, very strict parenting. And on the other end is parenting where it's overindulgence or it is a lack of involvement. Nobody cares, whatever you do is okay. Absent parents in a way, whether, they're physically there or not, but emotionally and in other ways they're not very invested or involved. And then there's everything in the middle, right? Of course, the ideal being the middle where there is both, where you give some independence to kids depending on the age and stage of life, but also at the same time there are boundaries and there is some oversight in terms of what kids are doing and so on. The thing is that if parents have been one way, for example, have been very over controlling while a child has been as young, gets into their teens, becomes an adult, that parenting style doesn't change overnight. That kind of a relationship that gets set up in the growing up years, that tends to continue. So if there's been a very over controlling parent for a child in their teens and 20s, that'll continue in the 30s, the interference might might turn up in a different way. And, it'll affect life in a different way. But the nature of it is not going to change in a way. With age, sometimes things change a little bit, but fundamentally things don't change until and unless there's an effort on either the parents' part or the kids' part to change something in that relationship.
A very basic question for those of us who do not understand the whole concept of boundaries. What are boundaries?
So boundaries really have to do with how relationships are conducted. It's in the context of a relationship between two people. To what extent you are open. So those are called porous boundaries, as in the sense of how open you are to other people influencing you or doing things for you and so on. Similarly, for you to be extending yourself, to be doing things for other people, and or how close you are to that. So even when we talk about boundaries, it's also on a spectrum of between being rigid and being porous. Being rigid being very, very closed and not letting anybody into your life and not letting other influence is very kind, to come into your life, and porous being where you're letting anybody and everybody take decisions for you, or you're overextending yourself without figuring out what's good for you and what's not good for you. So those are again extremes. And then so healthy boundaries means a balance of the two. So that means in terms of even things like help, how much help will you give to others while being mindful of your own stuff, and also whether you seek help from others or not, and let others help you, and so on. So not being very rigid or being very porous in your interpersonal relationships. So that's one concept of boundaries, and that's relevant in various kinds of relationships. But even within the family, at a family level, when two people come together to make a family, two people get married, there's a boundary they create around themselves as a couple, which means that there are certain things that are shared between the couple which are not shared with other people. Part of marriage is creating that boundary around yourselves as a couple against intrusions from anyone and anything. It could be work, it could be extended family, it could be even kids. Then you have a boundary around the family. You as a couple decide how you want to parent your children and how you want to raise them and what values and so on, without that getting overly influenced by, again, others, whether it's neighbors, extended family, whoever it is. So there are different kinds of boundaries, different degrees of boundaries. Again, it's about communication between parents and children. There are certain things as parents that you will communicate with children. There are other things that you won't, things that you don't share with your kids, you don't burden your kids with. For example, it could be financial stress, it could be trouble in your own relationship or miscommunication that you have, or whatever it is. That's not something that kids can handle. So you keep the kids out of that. At the same time, you do involve them in certain other decisions, what to make for dinner or whatever, depending on the age, right?
When you talk about literally protecting your child or not over involving the child in certain personal matters, there are in fact parents who go the other extreme and involve their kids in everything. Where is the balance in that when the kids know everything that is happening in the relationship, probably because the relationship is not strong enough of the parents? So the kids are almost compensating for the emotional support that the couple cannot get from each other. The kids
Mm-hmm.
are expected to fill in. And I think that is what we see around us most often. How do you really balance that?
Yeah, you're right that happens, and that tends to happen when the couples don't get along, and one seeks support or emotional support. Either the mother or the father from one of the kids. So that is definitely unhealthy because the child is not emotionally ready for the kind of support that you're expecting the child to give, or even for the kind of information that you're sharing with the child. How do you do that? Of course, see, children don't have really the ability when they're young to be able to figure out what's okay and what's not okay, right? I mean, for them, this is it. What they see and what they experience in their house and their family is their world. That's it. A lot of times, the realization that things have gone beyond or something shouldn't have happened that happened, or like they shouldn't have been burdened with this kind of information, all of this realization only comes as you grow older. As an adult, you can look around and say, okay, my family was this way, but somebody else's family is actually a different way, or a third person's was a third way, and then be able to compare and say, okay, this was probably too much, or this was not right, and so on. So as an adult, you have the cognitive ability, the thinking ability to be able to look at things critically and to reflect on that. However, family dynamics are very, very strong, and the relationships that get set up are very, very strong, and they tend to, like I said, they often tend to continue the same way. So as a grown-up child, if you want to change things, you have to make a conscious effort to change things and to to change the dynamics that have been set up. So like, for example, if there's a mother who's very dependent on, say, a daughter or a son, whichever way, whatever, right? And they will tell them everything, or they complain to them constantly about their spouse, and constantly try and get support from this child. Then the child kind of grows up as being this parentified child who's supposed to be there for their mom all the time, and they need to be the partner for the mom in a way for various kinds of things and decisions, and so to extricate yourself from that, to remove yourself from that takes uh, takes really conscious effort.
I think
Yeah.
a lot of kids are facing those issues, especially of family dynamics that you're talking about, right? Where the spouses don't get along and the kids are dragged into the entire relationship dynamics. And
Mm,
so one parent becomes extremely emotionally dependent on one
mm,
of the kids. And so the kids bear the consequences and sometimes negative consequences of that.
yeah,
So how
absolutely.
does a kid in that situation actually set up boundaries? It can't be easy, right?
No, so like I said, it's not easy because it takes two things, right, to set boundaries, because there are always two people in a relationship, any kind of a relationship, right? So for you to change the dynamics of the relationship, now, for example, what it looks like in your 20s or 30s is that now you have one parent who is in a way very close to you, yes. But what that also means is that they don't want you to go out traveling alone because they don't know what they'll do for those 5 days that you're away, or they don't want you to take up a job in X city because that means that you'll have to move away, or you have friends coming, or you have a romantic partner, and they scuttle that whole relationship. So and that happens, and I have spoken with a bunch of people who in their 20s, in their 30s, and even into their 40s, they struggle with that thing. They're living with their parents still, or they're living very close to their parents, and it's almost like a day-to-day kind of a thing. So to get out of that, as a grown-up child, you have to start saying no to certain things, right? That's part of what it is, to create that distance and say, okay, I have a life. If I get a better opportunity in X city, I'm going to go to that city. If I like somebody a lot, I'm going to meet them, or so just asserting yourself more and being willing to say no. Of course, it comes with what happens in relationships is there's a high degree of guilt, right? So when you want to do something for yourself, there is opposition from the other side, and there is this whole thing of but you're leaving me and going away, or what am I going to do, or the poor me thing. Relationships are regulated through various emotions, and in this kind of a relationship, guilt is one of those big emotions that gets played up, right, to hold on to whatever the relationship is that's been set up. As an adult child, learning to say no and not to feel guilty about doing things for your own self, right? So doing that more and more, and then of course on the other side, it's also for the parent to then also figure out that they need to find other ways to take care of themselves, their emotional needs. We're talking about a lot of older parents who are still very able, they are very capable of living independent lives and entertaining themselves and figuring out what to do with their day to day, right? So it's also about them figuring that out on their end.
Parents who lead independent lives, who don't expect all their needs to be fulfilled by their kids. Let's take a look at that.
To live independently, my health is very important. And for that, I maintain a regular routine of my walks, my yoga, my meditation, my eating habits, my diet, so that I don't fall sick. I don't want my children to be disturbed on account of my health. I lost my husband in the year 2011. I was emotionally broken, and it took me a lot of time to come back to my normal self. I realized, no, I cannot live like this. My children are also very much upset about me, and I started spending time with my friends, going out with them, spending a lot of time with my grandchildren. They really brought me back to what I am today. I have got a very good support system. My friend circle, my extended family. Like I met with an accident. I first called my friend, and they were there within 10 minutes. I didn't call my daughter because I knew she was working. We have such a good circle. We go out, we go on international holidays, we watch movies, we play cards, we have fun, we have picnics. So we spend a lot of time this way. 3-4 years ago, I thought that I should restart my music. So I started learning music. I started taking music classes, and that has really brought me back. I maintain boundaries with my children, my son, my daughter-in-law, my daughter, my son-in-law. They have their own lives. I have my own life. I don't want to interfere in their life, and they don't interfere in mine. They are happy when I am happy when they are happy. And why cling to them every time so that they get disturbed of me? You have to draw boundaries with your children. You can't expect every time everything that your children will do for you. Why? Make yourself capable of taking care of yourself so that your children, they are not troubled every time. My grandchildren, oh, there are no boundaries with them. They are just my friends, my darlings. I cling to them, they cling to me. This is the only relationship where there is a no boundary at all.
Very positive way to look at it. However, there are lots of cultural expectations. Besides majority of parents not creating independent lives, is that parents expect their kids to take care of all their needs, including emotional needs, which is not practically possible. How does one handle that?
Handling that definitely takes conscious effort, right? It might take a number of conversations. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's something that you kind of negotiate and renegotiate and kind of keep setting boundaries around. Also, because you can't in one conversation sort all kinds of boundaries, right? It gets expressed in so many different ways, right? From you don't come to see me often enough to, I need help with this, or, what am I going to do with that, or, so it's played up in many many different ways. So it's a constant work in progress to get to a point where it's a healthy relationship, where it is neither rigid nor porous, but it's in between. There is a give and take. So that means, as a grown up adult child, being willing to say no to certain things and saying, okay, fine, no, I think you're quite capable of doing things by yourself. Sometimes parents, older parents, need a little more encouragement. They need a little more direction, depending on what the situation and who the parent is. I mean, the thing is that in our culture, you're right that there is, and there's traditionally been the expectation that families stay together, joint families stay together, extended families stay together, and that the elderly are taken care of, emotional needs, physical needs, financial needs, everything's taken care of by kids. But then that's more and more that's not possible now, because more and more we have nuclear families and people are living in different places. That whole thing, while it's changing at one level, at another level, I think the expectation hasn't really caught up with the reality of things. Somewhere that is something that needs to be talked about and negotiated. The other thing is that for a lot of parents, the older generation, they come from a different set of values in terms of, okay, you save, you don't spend on yourself. A lot of moms may never have done things independently, going to the bank, taking care of your finances, traveling alone, because they haven't done it. It doesn't come easily. So in some ways, being patient and encouraging and saying, no, you can do it. Why don't you go with your friends or your siblings and travel and so on and so forth. So one is that kind of stuff. The other is also, just like I said before, to be able to say no and say, no, I have other priorities. No, I have other things that I want to do with my life that I need to do for myself. Going ahead and doing that without feeling too guilty.
Well, talking about the Indian cultural context, there's also this whole concept of obligation, and many children are made to feel a sense of obligation throughout their lives, especially when there is a single parent who sacrificed a lot to bring a child up. I wanted to play this clip of stand-up comic Jiveshu Aluwalia, who, what he has said has led to a lot of discussion in the Zen-Brain forum. So let's listen in.
हमारे माँ बाप से इसलिए प्यार करा जाता है कि उन्होंने आपको पैदा किया है। हमारे माँ बाप से इसलिए प्यार नहीं करा जाता क्योंकि आपको उनसे प्यार करना एक इंसान की तरह। मुझे आज तक ये बताया जाता है कि तुम्हारे पिताजी की डेथ हो गई थी जब तुम 4 साल के थे, आपकी माँ ने बहुत सेक्रीफाइस किया वो पालने में। मैं डिनाई नहीं कर रहा, लेकिन आई कैंट लिव अंडर एन ऑब्लिगेशन टू लव माई मदर। आई वॉन्ट टू लव हर फॉर हर एज अ पर्सन, because when I love a person I will do more for them rather than be obligated about them.
Incidentally, Doc Jiveshu is very close to his mother. But let's talk about this cultural expectation, almost like cultural pressure to feel obligated all the time. Doesn't that pressure actually lead to a lot of resentment?
It does. I think a lot of times it does lead to resentment, definitely. And it doesn't work because obviously nobody likes the whole pressure, the whole emotional blackmail, the whole sense of the whole obligation bit, right? You know, what I've also seen where there is a great relationship between adult kids and parents is where parents are willing to let go. They're willing to step back and let the child have their independent life and do things. And really love comes from a place of it's unconditional love. It's not based on you doing X for me, or you achieving X because that's important to me, or that'll look good in society, or whatever it is, right? The important thing for parents to realize is that that's what keeps that bond. Conditionality is always difficult. Conditionality always makes it very, very difficult in any relationship, also in a parent and child relationship. Anything that's done with a sense of obligation comes with a lot of baggage, with comes with a lot of negativity, and that's not pleasant for anyone. See, the other thing in the cultural context that we have to look at is also the definition of parenting. What is a good parent? What is a good mother? Who is a good mother? Who is a good father? So, good mother is this sacrificing, doing everything, taking on everything, not having a life of her own mother, right? And who is a good father? A good father is a good provider who is working really, really hard and provides for the family and takes on sacrifices and whatever, right? So that's our image of a good father and mother. Now, if that's the image that's been placed on you when you were a young parent, then when in your life are you going to have any fun? When in your life are you going to feel like you're doing something for yourself, or you're just being able to sit back and relax and do stuff, right? So a lot of, I think, the previous generation has lived those expectations of what this good father and good mother look like, and now they've reached a point where they feel like, okay, fine, we've done that. We've fulfilled our obligation in a way to our kids, right, and to society to be good parents, and now it's our turn to expect something back in return. But of course, things have also changed at the same time, where now people have different ideas about what a family looks like and different aspirations. And people, like for a lot of our generation, we are doing things for ourselves, right? We're not the all sacrificing mothers or fathers who will only, be doing. So we're living a very different life. And I think part of that is also where some of the conflict comes from, where there is this cultural shift that has happened, social, societal expectations on everyone, the older generation parents and now have kind of played a role in creating this, I think, in some cases.
We've been speaking so much about parents and what they do wrong. And then there are a bunch of kids also who do a lot of wrong, who
Sure.
are dependent on their parents throughout their lives.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
When are kids problematic, and when parents then need to start setting boundaries with their own kids?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely right about that. I mean, there is so again, going back to what we talked about parenting earlier, right? About on the one end being this very over controlling, to the other end being very permissive and very okay with whatever the child does, right? That's also not very healthy, because that's where you need to set boundaries. So what we're talking about is this whole healthy mix of being able to say again no to certain things to the child, while also being open to what the child needs and what the child wants and so on. The setting of boundaries is extremely important with children as well. And then also, when you think that the child is capable, has grown up, is an adult, then also to step back and say, no, now you have to figure out your own life, whether you need to work or you need to, in whatever way, you need to take on responsibility as an adult and do things, right? So you're absolutely right that there are lots of times when it could be that a child has gotten into trouble. It's individual stuff that's going on with the child, which has kind of brought the child to a place as an adult where they're not very independent, or they're not capable of taking care of their lives, or they're getting into trouble, or whatever it is, right? But sometimes it's also that the parents have had a contribution to make in that, because they didn't set enough boundaries with the child when the child was young and growing up, to help the child navigate the world and make healthy choices, right? Like I said, I mean, you can't always place all the blame on the parents. Sometimes it is very individual kind of stuff that happens. Even as a grown up, even as older parents, you have to set boundaries, sometimes financial boundaries, saying, no, we can't loan you money, or we can't give you, you have to do stuff for yourself, or time and effort in whatever way
it's not always parents that are in the wrong. However, it is a reflection of your parenting if the kids have turned out a certain way, right? So you bear the consequences. And would you agree that if parents have been unsuccessful in setting boundaries, it's evident that kids won't know how to set boundaries themselves? We were talking earlier, and one of the reasons why parents or kids are unable to really let go and lead independent, healthy, independent lives is because of this whole separation anxiety. So take us through what this is really.
So, see, separation anxiety, in some ways, it's a natural phase that children growing up go through, right? So they have to at some point separate with the parents, and separation is actually a process that goes on throughout one's life, right? So there are degrees of which that happen, and the point is, you're separate yet you're connected. You're not like separate, off on your own, in your own orbit, but you're separate and connected. Um, but what happens is, sometimes the whole concept of separation anxiety, the anxiety part of it, can sometimes even exist into adulthood, where, normally you expect most folks to be able to be okay negotiating that separation and that connection, that there is a healthy place where you're able to tolerate the discomfort, the distress that comes from being away from a loved one, and still stay connected to them, right? So what happens sometimes is that, for various reasons, it could be that there are issues with attachment in the way the kids are attached to their parents, either that the attachment has not been very good, not been very strong, or that parents have been, or one parent has been very over anxious, whoever is the primary person who's doing the caregiving for a child, that there is a lot of anxiety there and they're holding on to the child. They're overprotective. Sometimes it comes out as overprotectiveness or over involvement in the child's life, or over control. There's a grown up adult that I'm speaking with whose dad wouldn't let her go out with even her friends, even when she was in high school. So it can get played out in different ways. But the thing is that then the child doesn't learn how to negotiate or how to be okay with significant relationships, with relationships where they're really attached to somebody. So that's romantic relationships, or later on with their own children. Wherever there is strong attachment, how do you negotiate the distance in that attachment? So it gets played out as, when a spouse is traveling, there is a lot of anxiety, or it can come out as jealousy towards the spouse's friends. In terms of parenting and in terms of a parent-child relationship, sometimes it's that whole not being able to let go of, because you feel too anxious in letting go of the children. At some point, you do have to let go of them when they become teenagers or adults, but not being able to really do that.
We began by talking about difficult relationships between parents and adult children, and there are many kinds, of course. It's of course not possible for us here to discuss all the ways, but one of the most important aspects that we've discussed is laying healthy boundaries, and perhaps sometimes a concrete solution isn't available. Instead, it's work in progress. So I guess, Doc, that's really the way forward, right? Work in progress. And that is indeed progress. Very, very important is really finding the middle path between the rigid and porous boundaries. And second, parents also being independent, and three, knowing when to let go, when parents need to let go and when kids also need to let go.
I mean, you've said it. I think it's a work in progress, and that relationships are two-way streets. And I think, without getting stuck in finding fault, because anyways, one cannot go back to the past and fix anything. But there's a lot of potential in the present. We can change a lot of things in the present, and I think it's, for most parents, I think it's, and it's not that it's the mean evil parent. It's just that they have their histories. They come with their backgrounds. They come with certain cultural stuff that they're brought up with. So it's about just, you want to make changes, but you want to make changes in a way where doesn't have to hurt anybody, but it can bring both people to a point where, both kids and parents are in a position where they're living healthier, more independent, more fulfilling lives at the end of the day.
I call it careful communication with parents, obviously. And what I found is that most parents that one has met want the best for their children, want their children to do well. I think this careful communication between them really, really helps. And you can always look at the positive side to everything that they've done. Even the ones that you consider negative often has a positive spin to it. That's the way I see it. Well, Doc, it's learning for all of us. So thank you very much for joining us and discussing this very crucial topic. And I hope it's answered some of your queries. Keep your questions coming in. This is how you can reach us. Thank you very much, Dr. Dubey, for joining us again, all the way from
Thank
the
you
hills.
so much.